Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, McGovern, and members of the Rules Committee. Today I'm here to talk about two proposals that are that are part of congressional Republicans' larger so-called anti-woke agenda. H.R. 3724, the End Woke Higher Education Act, and H.R. 5339, the Protecting Americans' Investments from Woke Policies Act. Before I get into the specifics about each of these bills and why I oppose them, I would like to briefly comment on the Republicans' agenda this week. The bills we're considering this week are messaging bills. Messaging, just that. No substance, just messaging. They do nothing tangible to improve the Americans' lives. They are mere tools for my colleagues to message on and distract Americans from the fact that my colleagues are abdicating their sole responsibility as members of Congress to fund the government. We're 2 weeks away from a government shutdown, and my colleagues have no credible plan to avert it. H.R. 3724, the first bill this panel is considering, the so-called End Woke Higher Education Act. It is nothing more than a view attack on diversity and academic freedom in college curricula and establish constitutional free speech precedents on college campuses. It mirrors language in the House Republican so-called College Cost Reduction Act, which alters the standards under which accrediting bodies determine the quality of institutions of higher education. Additionally, H.R. 3724 incorporates the text of H.R. 7683, the Respecting the First Amendment on Campus Act, a bill that attempts an end run around the First Amendment to set up a whole new scheme to regulate speech and association rights on campus outside of established precedents and practices. The First Amendment protects some of the most deeply cherished rights we have as Americans. Any student who currently believes their First Amendment rights are being violated can bring a federal case against their public college or university. In doing so, they have over 200 years of precedent and case law that carefully define and determine how the First Amendment is to be interpreted and enforced in that situation. That includes precedents that specifically address the unique nature of colleges and universities as public entities that both must uphold constitutional rights and provide students with safe learning environments. If the courts rule for the student, the school must stop its action. But with this bill today before us, before this committee, the majority would have us throw those centuries of case law out the window and replace it with a hastily drafted substitute that claims to remove barriers that limit constitutional rights. What the bill actually does is make public colleges and universities who could be acting in good faith, attempting to protect the safety and security of everyone present on their campus, subject to monetary judgment and potential loss of Title 4.8, counter to Supreme Court precedent. In doing so, my colleagues who purport to be in favor of limited government are micromanaging how colleges and institutions handle their internal processes of governance. In addition to micromanaging how college campuses dispute First Amendment cases, this bill will also undermine the legitimacy of college accreditation. For decades, federally recognized accreditors have served as 1/3 of the oversight triad for the U.S. higher education system, along with the states and the federal government. Accreditation is meant to be the gold standard for college quality and performance. After all, accreditation is the gateway to billions of dollars in federal student aid each year. And I recognize that the accreditation system needs significant reforms. Unfortunately, H.R. 3724 does not make those critical reforms. Rather, it is a baseless attempt to inject culture war into the ever-important accreditation process. For example, the prohibition on litmus tests invites additional federal oversight into the accreditation process. And under this bill, accreditors may not assess a school's commitment to any ideology, belief, or viewpoint. The majority claims this would prevent a school from losing accreditation if they do not have a diversity, equity, and inclusion office. The reality is there is no evidence of that happening. There are conversely several examples of state officials pressuring schools not to teach certain classes or whole subjects that they believe cross the line between academic pursuit and ideological beliefs. And this is why this bill is so dangerous. For example, again, under this bill, the Department of Education could potentially revoke an accreditor's recognition over a claim that its standards for biology programs require the teaching of evolution, or the refusal to accredit a geology curriculum that dates the age of the Earth at 6,000 years, suggesting such standards were attempt to force a university to commit to a specific partisan, political, or ideological viewpoint or belief. H.R. 3724 represents a solution in search of a problem and fundamentally seeks to undermine students' First Amendment rights and our accreditation system. I oppose this bill, and I also urge my colleagues to oppose this bill. With your permission, Chairman Burr, may I go on the next? Thank you. Thank you very much. The next bill before us is H.R. 5339, the so-called Protecting Americans' Investments from Woke Policies Act. Workers should be able to invest in a way that reflects their values, whether combating climate change or promoting health and labor standards without sacrificing investment returns. Environmental, social, and governance, ESG, factors enable workers to be informed about potential risks and opportunities when evaluating an investment portfolio. The financial services industry recognizes the importance of considering ESG factors. For instance, State Street Global Advisors, one of the largest asset managers, noted that as a fiduciary, they have a duty to act prudently and in the best interest of their clients, which increasingly includes consideration of environmental, social, and governance factors relevant to the performance of the companies in which our clients invest. Just good business. Instead of ensuring retirees have sound investing advice, H.R. 5339 would needlessly inject partisan politics into workers' retirement investment decisions. The Biden-Harris administration has issued common sense rules related to ESG investing and proxy voting. This bill will replace those rules with flawed and unpopular ones from the Trump era. H.R. 5339 is premised on the Republicans' mistaken view that they know best when it comes to ESG investing, while Democrats continue to trust the professionals who are legally bound to make prudent decisions on behalf of retirement plan participants. Moreover, H.R. 5339 would undermine efforts to increase diversity among asset managers. This is a worthwhile endeavor. As the Government Accountability Office noted a few years ago, only 1% of the $70 trillion in global assets under management are managed by firms owned by women or people of color. There is also research to suggest that non-diverse firms do not outperform diverse firms across all asset classes. I oppose this bill, and I also urge my colleagues to oppose this bill. So, Mr. Chairman, these so-called anti-woke policies we're considering are not only regressive, they're also limiting important conversations about race, gender, and inequality. I wish my colleagues did not insist on burying their heads in the sand about the changing world around us, and instead join our efforts to create a more just and inclusive society. Americans are not interested in going back. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair thanks the gentleman. We thank both of our witnesses for their thoughtful comments before the committee.